Hey, John here from John's Do It Yourself. Before we begin, I always get comments, people writing saying, hey, I'd love to do what you do, but I don't have a wood shop. Trust me, this is not a wood shop. I want to reiterate that I actually take the car out of the garage before I begin each project and put it in at the end of the night. So now that we've dispelled that, let's get to this box. So for this box, I was given the contents of the box and asked to be creative. So what I did notice in the box is there was a gladius, and there was a lot of shaped objects that look like little shields. So I thought, how cool, we'll just go ahead and make the box in the shape of a shield. So I came up with a few ideas, I posted them on Facebook, and then we voted on it. So this is the shield that we chose, and then from this garage, I'm gonna show you how you can do it yourself and build a professional looking shadow box. Now I've built over 100 shadow boxes so far since I've started this channel. I still wouldn't consider myself a pro, and I still change it up as I go along. I never build the same style of shadow box. I never build the same shadow box at all. Every time I change something up, and so this time I'm going to change it up again, and you're going to catch it when you watch it. So let's get cutting.
Okay, so the first piece of wood I use is a 3-inch wide piece. If you have a 4-inch wide piece, use it. It will make your life easier later. I mark about 17 inches out, and then from that mark I draw a 45-degree angle line. Then take it to the miter saw and make your cut. Take that piece and lay it on top, match your 45-degree angle ends, and cut your straight edge. Now we are going to repeat this process, but first I need to rip a full piece and then cut it so we have a second set. I am just repeating the steps I did, but this time we are cutting down a full piece to get it to match the piece we just made. Now that we have created our bottom piece, we are going to rip the side pieces. Take the two pieces you just cut, hold them together, and set them on their side. Move the fence so that the pieces are up against the blade. Tap the blade so you have a little play, and then rip a full piece. The piece you just ripped, when placed on its side, will be the height of the box off the wall. It should also be the same as two stacked pieces, which will be how we make up the top and bottom bends of the box. After you have this piece ripped, rip a second one exactly the same. Now we are going to cut the piece for the top of the box. So make your mark at 34 inches. Yes, remember your first cut was at 17? So 17 times 2, which gives you the width of the box. 34 gives you a little bit of working room. Okay, in our rough draft picture, we had the arches pretty curvy. Well, if they are not that round in the final product, it's because I am trying to conserve wood. It is very expensive lately. So to save on wood, I will cut this piece perfectly in half. So I measure it, and what do you know, it's exactly 6 inches wide. So I will set the center of the saw blade at 3 inches. Align your 3-inch mark in the center of one of the blade's teeth. Then set your fence. Yeah, I can get away with this because I'm making it up as I go along. Rip your piece in half. Once complete, stack them to check that they are identical. If not, send the larger of the two back through. With your top and bottom cut, you can glue all of your pieces together. Take your clamps and clamp the wood tightly together. Allow it to sit for an hour and then come back once the glue sets. Now, with everything dry, you can unclamp your pieces. With all of the pieces we just made, you can now lay them out and decide how long you want to make the box. Now remember, this depends on what you're actually putting in the box. And at this point, I have a flag to incorporate. So at the bottom, we will be adding the flag plus the sword, and that will be coming in from the top. So my long side pieces will be able to extend up and down based on how those objects fit in the box. Now let's draw out the top arch. Remember, your wood is only 3 inches wide, so you need to keep your arch within those parameters. Yes, I eyeballed this arch, but I will fold it back on itself to check that it matches. If not, I can make adjustments. And yes, I got pretty lucky here, and no, I am not one of those people that can draw a perfect circle on a chalkboard. Lay your paper arch onto your piece, and with a speed square, align the far side. Now, make your mark and cut the other end. Once cut, You can trace the arch onto the wood. I did this, but after doing it, I thought it would just be easier to tape down the arch onto the wood and use as a direct template when I cut it out. Don't be in a rush at this point and take your time cutting out your arch. If you don't own a bandsaw, don't fret. This is actually much easier with a jigsaw. I think your lines look a lot better if you use a jigsaw. So, you don't need to have all the power tools to do this job. If you doubt it, go back and watch my Texas Shadowbox build. Once your arch is cut, put it in place to see if everything still looks good. With the top of the arch cut, you know what the width of the box will be. That is, from side to side. Now you can tape a few pieces of paper together and build your lower arch. Remember, you will only be sketching out one side. Once your sketch is complete, you can use a scrap piece of board to make your lines the correct width and to straighten them up. With one side drawn out, you can now cut it free. Once cut free, you can fold it back onto itself and trace out the other side. This is to ensure both sides are identical. First, I cut the templates at the point to separate them into two pieces, and then I taped them to their wood counterparts. I just repeated the same process I did earlier with the top arch, and I taped the template to the wood and then cut them free. Now take your pieces back to the workbench and make sure that they still look symmetrical. We are now going to join the lower arch pieces together. We will use a pocket jig to do this. After your holes are drilled, put your glue on the end of each piece and then screw tightly together. So when we made our templates, the ends did not align with the flush edge. So here we need to square and ensure that our piece is even, and then mark the edge. I use my cutting mat marks to lay out my piece. I put each point on the 0 mark at my cutting mat. Then I use a square to make my mark. I simply cut the line after making this mark. That way both ends are equally flush. Before we join all the sides together, I am going to do a quick sanding of the inside of each arch. Just the inside. Do not sand the outside yet. If you do not have a belt sander, wait until the frame is all screwed together before you sand the inside of your frame. Before you join the top arch to the side piece, you need to trim the side piece. Simply place the side flush up against the arch and continue the direction of the arch with a pencil. Then just simply take it to the miter saw and trim away the excess. Next we will join the side edge to the bottom arch. Drill your pocket hole and set your glue. Now pay attention and align your inside edge, not the outside edge. We will be trimming away the extra width of the arch once they are joined from the outside edge. Continue drilling your pocket holes and gluing and then setting your screws until the frame is all put together. At this point, your perimeter frame should be all put together and all should be looking well. With the frame together, you can use a jigsaw, a bandsaw, or even a table saw to trim away the slight lip on the outside of the lower joint now. Next we need to make the rabbets for both the plexiglass and the back plate. First, to avoid any fireworks, I remove all the screws from the frame. Before doing this, make sure your frame is good and dry. I take a 1/2 inch router bit, raise it just above the height of the plexiglass. Trim the inside of the frame all the way around. The side that you should be trimming would be the side with the screw showing. This way, any pocket holes showing on the top of the frame will be hidden by the faceplate once it's glued down. Readjust your bit for the height of the back plate. Use a scrap piece if needed. And then repeat the same process of trimming the entire interior of the frame. At this point, find the center of the top of the arch and make a mark. With a jigsaw, cut out the width of the gladius blade. Then, with a sanding wheel or a Dremel, sand out the indentation for the gladius to lay under the plexiglass. Before moving on, lay the sword in the slot and lay a straight edge on the lower lip across each end. where the plexiglass will sit. This is to ensure that the blade fully clears the lip. You don't want to run into this problem later on after you already have the plexiglass installed. While we are on the subject of plexiglass, let's make our marks so we can cut it out. Simply lay it over the frame and with a Sharpie, trace out the edge of the lip. So, in order to trim the plexiglass, I pulled out the bandsaw. But having thought about the faceplate all day, it was at this point I decided to make the faceplate really thin like I did with the ammo box. And watching this video, it made me think that I have Alzheimer's or maybe ADD or something. Because like I said, I pulled out the bandsaw and then forgot that I pulled it out to cut the plexiglass. And I started cutting the faceplate. So anyway, I took one piece of wood and completely ripped it in half. This gave me 2 even pieces. If you have not watched my hack to get perfectly thin rips, then put that down on your to-do list. But let's cut this board in half. While putting the pieces I just cut onto the frame to see how I could cover the whole frame without cutting more wood, I noticed the plexiglass. I aligned and ripped the straight edges of the plexiglass on the table saw first. Then I took it over to the bandsaw to cut the curves. Now this can be done with a jigsaw too, but if I would have used that, I would not have been able to cut the faceplate out of order. With the plexiglass cut, you can use it as a template to trace out your backplate. Both front and back rabbets should be identical. With the backplate traced out onto your tempered hardboard, you can cut it out. And as you can see here, this time I actually used a jigsaw because I was too lazy to get the bandsaw out today. Okay, I'm going to try and get the entire faceplate out of this one board that I have cut in half. So what I am doing now serves 3 purposes. 1, it keeps the faceplate from sharing the same joint as the corners of the frame. This will give it more strength since the screws are no longer in it. The second is so I can use the pieces in the center to cross the arch. And third is so that they all share the same grain and grain direction. Do not change the direction of your grain and think you can just make the arch go crossways. This will be very noticeable in the end product if you do this. So my first piece will be both straightaways, and then whatever wood is left over from the center, I will use it if it's needed when I cut the other piece to make it across the arches. Align your straightaways with the inside edge of the box and clamp down to the frame. Now you can begin cutting the pieces to cover the arches. Make sure you keep in mind that there will be a flag going in the lower portion of this box. So I want to leave a little room for an army logo just above the tip. So I'm not sure exactly how much wood I will have to play with. So when you cut your pieces, be conservative for the top arch, but the larger you cut, the more you have to work with when shaping the lower portion. Once all your pieces are cut, make marks to show the alignment you currently have. When we go to glue these together, we will need to remove the frame first, and you want to make sure you get these pieces back in the exact same positions. Now that the bottom is done, we just need to repeat the same process for the top arch. With all your pieces cut, you can glue them together. I waited a few hours before I came back and removed the clamps. As you can see, the large clamp is squeezing everything together, and the smaller ones, along with some straight edges, are keeping anything from buckling under the pressure. My next step was to design the lower portion of the faceplate. I wanted it to be able to hide the lower portion of the flag while still leaving enough space for a logo. And I'm not even sure how I am going to do the logo yet. But I did want this to be a little stylish, and I was told to be creative, so let's see how this comes out. Once I have my lines drawn out, I simply cut it out with the jigsaw. If it does not look good, I can always come back and adjust it. First I sanded with 100, then 220, and finished with 320. Just sand the top side. You need the bottom to stay rough so your glue gets a really good bond to the frame. After that, wipe it down and stain. I stained this box with red mahogany. Like always, I just use paper towels. While you are staining, stain the inside of the frame, just the inside of the frame. I want an inch between the tip of the gladius and the top of the ensign frame, so I place a piece of duct tape down to use as a reference. So now I need to cut the frame for the ensign housing. This will be really thin, so I only need to cut one piece. Once to size, I will rip it in half to give me my other side. Take a measurement from the inside of your frame, from the plexiglass rabbet to the backplate rabbet. Sorry for the crappy video footage here. Once you have that, you can set your table saw. You're going to rip this piece so it will fit nicely between the backplate and the plexiglass when the box is fully put together. With your piece cut to size, you can now rip it in half. Once cut, you should have two thin identical pieces with the 45-degree angle already cut. Lay it in position. Remember to keep it below the duct tape mark, and then mark each end. Try to make your marks flow with the shape of the frame. Then simply cut the contour of your mark. Now you can join the two pieces together. I glue and place a staple in the end, and then set in a square to make sure it stays perfectly square while drying. At this point, we are almost done with the making of this box. The display board process has not changed much for me in the last 50 boxes. So I did want to take a moment here and thank everyone who has watched this far into the video. I know it's a long one. If this is your first time watching, hit that like and subscribe button. But for those of you who love this stuff like me, I could watch these videos all day. There's just something so satisfying about people's woodworking processes. You can always learn something new. So take a moment and leave a comment below. I know this is a long video, so let me know. Too much detail, not enough detail, or just right. Alright, let's get back to it. With the display board cut, felted, and glued into place, we can now sand our ensign triangle. So when I had the display board in place, I laid the gladius in the slot. Now this might not bother you, but it bothered me. Once hung on a wall, the gladius would be hanging freely, so it would be equal distance away from the display board. But I was worried that while in transit or when being hung, the gladius might move a bit too much and hit objects in the box, or even scratch the plexiglass. So I took a few minutes to build a small piece that would hold the gladius in place. I would felt it so it would not be noticeable in the end, and it would be under the blade. And I felt that this would alleviate my concerns. Overkill? Yes, but I have been known for that. And besides, I'm doing this for fun. I wanted to give the ensign frame a little more support where it attached to the frame of the box. So I cut a few little pieces and glued them to the frame. Then I glued the ensign frame to those. I think it worked out well. Now we need to prep to put down the faceplate. I pulled back the plexiglass plastic protection about a ½ an inch all the way around the perimeter of the box, and with some Scotch tape I use it to hold it in place. Take your wood glue and put a bead all the way around the perimeter of the frame. Once complete, smooth it out with your finger. Pull to the outside and try to keep from getting any large amounts close to the plexiglass. Now I always say this in all my Shadowbox videos. Go to your neighbor's house and ask them if you can borrow their clamps too. Yes, neighbors plural. You can never have too many clamps during this process. So, take your faceplate and align it over your box. Using some scrap pieces, place them between the faceplate and the clamps. This way you will not have to worry about the pressure rings after the fact. Apply all your clamps. Now don't rush this. If you want to wait a day, I suggest you do it, because there is a difference between your glue being dry and your glue curing. Drying takes about an hour depending on the humidity. Curing is usually done overnight, like about 24 hours. So I waited about 2 hours and I came back and removed all the clamps. Now we can move on. So here is another trick I do. At this point, you can't afford to have any chipping when you trim your faceplate. So you want to take off any excess that will burden your trimming bit. My bandsaw table is not that big, so here is a trick that allows me to help support the box and keep it parallel while I cut it. I take a simple piece of birch plywood and I clamp it to the top of the table. Before you start trimming, place some painter's tape over the faceplate to help protect it from scratches. Now you can trim away the excess. I leave a little less than 1/4 of an inch of a lip. This will be easy work for my trim bit when I get to the router table. Once on the router table, just use a simple countertop trim bit to remove the remaining portion of the faceplate so it is flush with the rest of the box. When you get to the gladius opening at the top of the box, ensure your bit is high enough to maintain contact with the frame. If your bit wheel is too low and slips into the hole, this could be disastrous. So I raised mine just for this pass because I like my blade a little bit low. But I raised it just for the pass of the hole, and then I lowered it back down for the rest of the box. Now you can remove the protective tape you placed on it earlier to make sure everything looks good. For just an added bit of precaution, I grab a spackle blade and I go back and tuck the protective cover from the plexiglass back under the faceplate. Okay, back to sanding. If you don't know my process by now, it's still the same. 100, 220, and then finish up with 320. I'm not going to sit here and make you watch me sand. With everything sanded, you can now stain the perimeter of your box and touch up anything on the faceplate that needs it. Now you can buy an emblem, mount a coin, or even add a sticker or logo to the bottom. I decided that I would just laser engrave the Army logo at the base of the frame. I thought that would be cool, and I think it turned out great. From here, I folded the flag with a thin piece of birch under the top layer, and then I taped it up against the plexiglass, drilled my pilot holes for the back plate, and then I added the contents to the display board, and finished with applying a small layer of polyurethane to the faceplate. Once dry, you can put your box together, insert your gladius, and then remove the plexiglass protection. Your last step is to screw your backplate into place, and then mount your hanging brackets. So, pull off the plastic protection and blow off any dust remaining, and that's it. The owner of this box had just bought a new house, and this keepsake was one of the first things hung on his wall. So, professional results can be achieved in your own garage. Remember, I still just make this up as I go along. So what do you think of the results? Did we hit the mark? Would love to hear your comments below. And while you're here, hit that thumbs up button. As always, thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.